Standing outside my family's estate on Easter morning, holding a custom gift that had taken me 3 months to create, I heard the words that would change everything. "We don't need you here, Diana. This is for real, family." My mother delivered this verdict through the mahogany door, speaking to her own daughter like I was a stranger seeking charity. What she didn't know was that the real family she was protecting had been surviving on my success for the past 5 years. And in exactly 72 hours, they would be begging me to save them from complete financial ruin. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Diana Walsh stood in the circular driveway of the Westmont family estate, watching the April sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns where she had played as a child. The irony was not lost on her that Easter morning, a day of resurrection and new beginnings, would become the day her relationship with her family died completely. She had driven 4 hours from Boston to Millbrook, Connecticut, carrying with her a carefully wrapped package that represented months of meticulous work. Inside the elegant silver wrapping paper was a leather-bound genealogy book she had commissioned from one of the country's most respected historical researchers. The book traced the Westmont family lineage back 7 generations, complete with hand-drawn family trees, historical photographs, and detailed narratives about each ancestor's contributions to American history. Diana had discovered that their great-great-grandfather had been a prominent abolitionist who had helped establish several underground railroad stations throughout New England. Their great-grandmother had been one of the first women to graduate from Radcliffe College, and had founded a scholarship fund for underprivileged students that still existed today. The family had a rich heritage of social contribution and intellectual achievement that none of them had ever known about. The project had cost Diana $12,000 of her own money, not including the hundreds of hours she had spent reviewing historical documents, coordinating with archives, and verifying genealogical connections. She had envisioned presenting it during Easter dinner as a surprise that would bring the family together around their shared history and values. Now she stood outside the front door of the house where she had grown up, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation filtering through the windows, knowing she would not be welcomed inside. The rejection had begun 3 weeks earlier when Diana had called to confirm her attendance at the annual Easter celebration. Her mother, Patricia Westmont, had answered the phone with her usual tone of polite formality that she reserved for people she considered beneath her social station. "Diana, how unexpected to hear from you," Patricia had said, as if her own daughter calling to discuss family plans was somehow irregular. "I wanted to confirm the time for Easter dinner and see if I could bring anything special for the family." There had been a pause, the kind of silence that carries more weight than words. Patricia had cleared her throat before responding with carefully measured words. "Actually, Diana, we've decided to keep this year's celebration more intimate. Just immediate family. You understand." Diana had felt the familiar sting of exclusion, but she had pressed forward with the optimism that had sustained her through 2 decades of similar rejections. "Mom, I am immediate family. I'm your daughter." "Of course you are, dear. But you know how these things are. Margaret is bringing the grandchildren, and Robert has some important business associates joining us. It's become quite the gathering of accomplished people. We wouldn't want you to feel out of place." The conversation had continued for another 10 minutes, with Patricia presenting various reasons why Diana's presence would be inconvenient, inappropriate, or somehow detrimental to the family's Easter celebration. Her sister Margaret was now a partner at a prestigious law firm. Her brother Robert had recently been promoted to vice president at his investment banking company. The guest list included prominent members of Connecticut's social elite, people who moved in circles where connections and appearances mattered more than character or authentic relationships. Diana, in her mother's estimation, simply did not fit the image the family wanted to project. She was unmarried at 34, lived in a modest apartment rather than an impressive estate, and worked in what Patricia dismissively called creative pursuits rather than traditional professional careers. What Patricia Westmont did not understand was that her daughter's creative pursuits had made Diana one of the most successful, independent documentary producers in the Northeast. Operating under her professional name, Diana Walsh Productions, She had created award-winning documentaries for major networks, streaming platforms, and educational institutions. Her work had been featured at Sundance, had won 2 Emmy nominations, and had generated millions in revenue over the past 5 years. More importantly for the family's current circumstances, Diana had been quietly managing significant financial responsibilities that kept the Westmont estate operational and maintained the family's comfortable lifestyle. Through a series of carefully structured arrangements, she had been covering property taxes, maintenance costs, and various family expenses, while allowing her parents and siblings to believe their lifestyle was sustained by their own success. The arrangement had begun during the 2008 financial crisis, when the family's investment portfolio had collapsed and her father's real estate development business had nearly gone bankrupt. Diana had stepped in with financial assistance, but she had structured the help in ways that preserved her family's pride and dignity. Property tax payments were handled through anonymous trust arrangements. Maintenance and utility costs were covered through what appeared to be advantageous service contracts that Diana had negotiated using her business connections. Major repairs and renovations were funded through what the family believed were insurance settlements or municipal improvement programs. For 5 years, Diana had been the invisible foundation supporting everything the Westmont family had built their identity around. The estate that hosted their social gatherings, the lifestyle that maintained their status in Connecticut society, and the financial security that allowed them to pursue their careers without worry about basic expenses, had all been sustained by the daughter they considered insufficiently accomplished to join their Easter celebration. Standing in the driveway on Easter morning, Diana had made one final attempt to bridge the gap between her family's perception and reality. She had rung the doorbell and waited for someone to answer, rehearsing in her mind how she would present the genealogy book and perhaps use the moment as an opportunity to rebuild their relationship. Margaret had opened the door, dressed in an elegant Easter outfit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Her expression had shifted from mild curiosity to obvious discomfort when she saw Diana standing on the front steps. "Diana, what are you doing here?" "Mom said," she explained, "that today wasn't appropriate for you to visit. I have something special for the family. A gift that I think everyone would appreciate, especially today." Margaret had glanced over her shoulder nervously, as if Diana's presence was creating some kind of emergency that required careful management. "This really isn't a good time. We have guests, and Mom has planned everything very carefully. Your being here would complicate things." Before Diana could respond, Patricia Westmont had appeared behind Margaret, her face set in the expression of polite but firm authority that Diana remembered from childhood encounters with unwelcome salespeople or solicitors. "Diana, I thought we discussed this on the phone. This gathering is for established family members and their appropriate guests. You simply don't fit the dynamic we're trying to create today." The words had landed like physical blows. Established family members. As if Diana's relationship to the family was somehow provisional or uncertain. As if 34 years of being Patricia Westmont's daughter could be revoked based on social considerations. Diana had held up the wrapped package, making one final attempt to demonstrate her value and belonging. "I spent months creating something special for our family history, something that I think would mean a lot to everyone, especially the grandchildren. It shows them where they come from and what our ancestors accomplished." Patricia's expression had not changed. If anything, it had become more resolute. "That's very thoughtful, Diana, but we don't need you here today. This is for real family. People who have built something meaningful with their lives. People who contribute to society in ways that matter." The door had closed with quiet finality, leaving Diana alone in the driveway with her gift, and the devastating realization that her own mother had defined her as something other than real family. Diana had walked slowly back to her car, placed the genealogy book carefully in the passenger seat, and sat in silence for several minutes while processing what had just occurred. Through the windows of the house, she could see figures moving around the dining room, preparing for a celebration that would proceed as if she had never existed. The drive back to Boston had given Diana 4 hours to think about her relationship with her family, her role in their lives, and her own identity independent of their approval or recognition. By the time she reached her apartment, She had made several important decisions about how she would respond to this rejection. The first decision was to stop the anonymous financial support that had been sustaining the family's lifestyle. The second was to withdraw from all the behind-the-scenes assistance she had been providing for various family business ventures and social obligations. The third was to redirect her energy and resources toward people and projects that genuinely valued her contributions. Diana spent the remainder of Easter Sunday reviewing financial documents, legal arrangements, and business contracts that connected her to various aspects of her family's life. The scope of her involvement was more extensive than she had realized. Property management, insurance policies, business loans, investment accounts, tax strategies, and estate planning all had Diana's fingerprints on them in ways that had been designed to remain invisible to the family. Unwinding these arrangements would take time and careful coordination, but Diana was methodical by nature and had built her career on managing complex projects with multiple moving parts. She began creating a timeline for gradually removing her support systems while ensuring that the process would not create legal complications or immediate hardships that might harm innocent parties. What Diana did not anticipate was that her family's financial situation was more precarious than anyone realized, and that removing her support would trigger a crisis much more quickly than she had planned. Within 72 hours of the Easter rejection, events would unfold that would force the Westmont family to confront exactly how much they had been depending on the daughter they had declared unnecessary. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The phone call would come on Wednesday evening while Diana was editing footage for a new documentary about successful women entrepreneurs who had overcome family opposition to build meaningful careers. The irony would not be lost on her that she was literally working on a story about her own experience when her mother's name appeared on her caller ID for the first time in months. Patricia Westmont's voice would carry a tone Diana had never heard before. Not the polite formality or the dismissive authority, but something approaching desperation. "Diana, we need to talk. Something terrible has happened, and we need your help." But that conversation was still 3 days away. On Easter Sunday evening, Diana Walsh sat in her Boston apartment, surrounded by the evidence of her successful career and the financial records that documented her family's dependence on her invisible support. For the first time in her adult life, she was planning a future that did not include trying to earn her family's approval or acceptance. The genealogy book sat on her dining room table, its silver wrapping paper catching the light from her apartment windows. Inside those pages was proof that the Westmont family had always been defined by individuals who stood up for principle, who contributed to society despite opposition, and who measured success by the positive impact they made on the world. Diana realized that in rejecting her, her family had actually freed her to become the person her ancestors would have been proud of. Someone who did not compromise their values for social acceptance. Someone who built meaningful work despite family opposition. Someone who understood that real family is defined by support, respect, and genuine love rather than social status or financial success. The phone would ring in 72 hours with Patricia Westmont's desperate plea for help. But Diana Walsh was no longer the person who would automatically say yes to her family's demands. She had become someone who understood her own worth and would require that others recognize it as well. The resurrection that Easter morning had promised would indeed occur, but it would be Diana's resurrection from the role of invisible supporter to visible leader, from rejected daughter to independent woman, from someone who sought family approval to someone who built her own definition of success and belonging. The transformation had begun with those devastating words through the mahogany door. "We don't need you here, Diana. This is for real family." Within 3 days, Patricia Westmont would discover exactly how wrong she had been about what her family needed, and who qualified as real family. But by then, Diana Walsh would have become someone entirely different from the woman who had stood in that driveway, holding a carefully wrapped gift and hoping for acceptance. She would have become someone who no longer needed to hope for anything because she had learned to create everything she needed for herself. Diana Walsh woke up Tuesday morning with the clarity that comes from making difficult but necessary decisions. The previous day had been spent creating detailed spreadsheets documenting every financial arrangement, business relationship, and support system that connected her to the Westmont family operations. The scope of her involvement was more extensive than even she had fully appreciated. Her apartment's home office had been transformed into a command center for strategic withdrawal. 3 computer monitors displayed different aspects of the unwinding process: financial accounts, legal documents, and timeline projections. Diana had built her documentary production career on meticulous research and systematic analysis, skills that now served her perfectly as she prepared to extract herself from her family's financial ecosystem. The first phase would begin immediately. Diana had identified 12 separate arrangements that could be terminated without causing immediate hardship, but would create noticeable changes in the family's monthly expenses and available resources. Property management services, insurance premium assistance, utility subsidies, and maintenance contracts would all be modified or canceled over the next 30 days. The second phase, involving more significant financial commitments like property tax support and major maintenance reserves, would be phased out over 60 to 90 days. This timeline would provide the family with sufficient notice to make alternative arrangements, while ensuring that Diana was not responsible for any emergency situations that might arise. The third phase would address the most complex arrangements, including business loan guarantees, investment account backing, and estate planning structures that had Diana's financial commitments embedded within them. These would require legal assistance to unwind properly and might take up to 6 months to complete. Diana had contacted Marcus Rivera, the attorney who handled her business legal requirements, and scheduled a meeting for Wednesday morning to discuss the process of extracting herself from various family financial obligations without creating legal liability or immediate crisis situations. What Diana did not anticipate was how quickly her family's precarious financial situation would become evident once her support systems were removed. The Westmont family's appearance of prosperity was more dependent on her invisible assistants than anyone realized, including Diana herself. The first indication of trouble came Tuesday afternoon when Margaret called Diana's cell phone. This was unusual for several reasons. Margaret rarely initiated contact with Diana. They had not spoken since the Easter door incident 2 days earlier, and Margaret's tone carried an urgency that Diana had never heard before. "Diana, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," Margaret began without any preliminary social conversation. "Of course. What is it? Have you been involved in any financial arrangements related to the family estate or mom and dad's expenses?" Quote, Diana felt her heart rate increase. Margaret was a partner at Morrison, Caldwell & Associates, one of Connecticut's most prestigious law firms. Her specialty was corporate financial law, which meant she possessed the expertise to recognize sophisticated financial structures and trace complex money flows. "Why are you asking, Margaret?" "Because I've been reviewing Mom and Dad's financial situation as part of some estate planning work, and there are discrepancies that don't make sense. Their monthly expenses significantly exceed their documented income sources, but somehow all their bills are being paid. Property taxes that should be creating financial stress are being handled through arrangements that I can't trace back to any family resources." Diana realized that Margaret's legal training had enabled her to identify patterns that their parents had never questioned. Patricia and Robert Westmont Sr. had simply accepted that their financial obligations were being handled efficiently, without investigating the mechanisms that made their comfortable lifestyle possible. "Margaret, this is complicated. Can we meet in person to discuss it?" "No, Diana. I need to understand this now. Are you financially supporting Mom and Dad without their knowledge?" The direct question required a direct answer. Diana had always prided herself on honesty, even when the truth was complicated or uncomfortable. "Yes, for the past 5 years I've been covering various expenses and providing financial assistance through arrangements designed to preserve their dignity and independence." The silence on the phone lasted nearly 30 seconds. Diana could hear Margaret processing this information and its implications for everything their family had believed about their financial security and independence. "Diana, how much money are we talking about?" "Approximately $40,000 to $50,000 per year, depending on maintenance needs and unexpected expenses." Another long silence. Diana, that's $250,000 over 5 years. How have you been able to provide that level of support? Diana explained her documentary production success, her business revenue streams, and her decision to use her financial resources to help family members who had experienced difficulties during the economic downturn years earlier. Margaret's response was not what Diana expected. Diana, I need you to continue whatever arrangements you have in place, at least until we can figure out alternative solutions. Mom and Dad have no idea how dependent they've become on your support, and if it disappears suddenly, they could face serious financial difficulties. Margaret, I was excluded from Easter dinner 2 days ago because I wasn't considered real family. Mom told me that this gathering was for people who have built something meaningful with their lives and contribute to society in ways that matter. I've been contributing in ways that none of you understood, and I was dismissed as irrelevant. Margaret's voice shifted to the tone she typically used during difficult legal negotiations. Diana, I understand you're hurt by what happened Sunday. But this is bigger than hurt feelings. We're talking about Mom and Dad potentially losing the house they've lived in for 30 years. Then perhaps it's time for them to understand the reality of their financial situation and make appropriate adjustments. Diana, you can't just abandon them. They're family. The irony was not lost on Diana that Margaret was now emphasizing family obligations after participating in Diana's exclusion from the family Easter celebration. The definition of family seemed to shift based on convenience and need, rather than consistent principles of loyalty and support. Margaret, I was told Sunday that I wasn't real family, that I didn't belong with people who had accomplished meaningful things. Now you're telling me I have family obligations that prevent me from making independent decisions about my own financial resources. Those are two completely different situations, Diana. No, they're not. They're the same situation viewed from different perspectives, based on what the family needs from me at any given moment. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Margaret alternating between legal arguments about family responsibilities and emotional appeals about their parents' welfare. Diana listened carefully but remained committed to her decision to withdraw her financial support gradually and systematically. After the call ended, Diana realized that the family's financial dependence on her was more severe than she had understood. Margaret's panic suggested that removing Diana's support would create immediate and serious consequences rather than the manageable adjustment period Diana had envisioned. This realization led Diana to call Robert Jr., her brother, to gauge his awareness of the family's financial situation. Robert worked as a vice president at Hartwell Investment Management, which gave him sophisticated understanding of financial planning and wealth management. Robert's phone went straight to voicemail, which was typical. Diana left a message asking him to call her about a family financial matter that required his expertise and attention. The return call came 6 hours later, at 9:30 Tuesday evening. Diana, what's this about family finances? Margaret called me earlier saying something about financial arrangements and support systems. She seemed upset, but I couldn't understand what she was talking about. Diana explained the situation to Robert, providing the same information she had shared with Margaret about her role in supporting their parents' expenses over the past 5 years. Robert's reaction was different from Margaret's legal panic. As someone who worked in wealth management, he immediately understood the implications of what Diana was describing. Diana, are you telling me that you've been subsidizing Mom and Dad's entire lifestyle without any of us knowing about it? Not their entire lifestyle, but significant portions of their major expenses, yes. And you're planning to stop this support? I'm planning to withdraw gradually over the next several months, yes. Quote, Robert's tone shifted to something Diana recognized from his professional dealings. The voice he used when delivering bad news to clients about their financial situations. Diana, based on what you're telling me, Mom and Dad are going to face a financial crisis that could result in bankruptcy or forced sale of the estate. Their monthly expenses exceed their income by thousands of dollars, and they have no reserve funds or alternative income sources to compensate for losing your support. Then perhaps it's time for them to adjust their lifestyle to match their actual financial resources. Diana, they're in their 70s. People their age don't adjust their lifestyles. They lose everything and become dependent on family members for basic support. If you withdraw your financial assistance, you'll be forcing them into a situation where they'll need even more help from us, not less. Robert's argument was essentially that Diana's financial independence would create greater family obligations rather than fewer ones. The logic was that she had no choice but to continue supporting their parents because the alternative would be more disruptive and expensive for everyone involved. Robert, I was told Sunday that I'm not real family, that I don't belong with people who have accomplished meaningful things. Now you're arguing that I have permanent financial obligations to people who don't consider me worthy of sharing a holiday meal with them. Diana, you're being unreasonable. What happened Sunday was unfortunate, but this is about Mom and Dad's basic security and welfare. The conversation continued along similar lines, with Robert alternating between financial analysis and family obligation arguments. Like Margaret, he seemed unable to understand that Diana's decision was based on principle rather than emotion, and that her withdrawal of support was intended to create clarity about family relationships, rather than punishment for specific incidents. After Robert's call, Diana sat in her apartment looking out at the Boston skyline and processing what she had learned about her family's financial situation and their response to her decision to withdraw support. Both Margaret and Robert had contacted her within hours of beginning the process of unwinding her financial arrangements. This suggested that the family's dependence on her support was more immediate and visible than she had realized. It also indicated that her siblings were more aware of the family's financial vulnerabilities than their parents were. Most significantly, both siblings had responded to the crisis by demanding that Diana continue her support, rather than acknowledging that their treatment of her had been inappropriate or unfair. Neither had mentioned the Easter incident or suggested that the family owed Diana an apology or explanation for her exclusion. Diana realized that her family viewed her as a financial resource rather than a family member. Her value was measured entirely by her ability to solve problems and provide support, not by any intrinsic worth as a person or daughter or sister. This understanding was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it confirmed that her family's lack of respect and appreciation was not based on misunderstanding or communication problems, but on a fundamental view of her as a utility rather than a person. Liberating because it freed her from any remaining obligation to seek their approval or acceptance. Diana spent Wednesday morning in her attorney's office, discussing the legal implications of withdrawing from various financial commitments and family business arrangements. Marcus Rivera was experienced in complex business dissolutions and family financial disputes, and he provided clear guidance on how Diana could extricate herself while minimizing legal risks and potential complications. Diana, based on what you've described, you've been functioning as an anonymous family trust for the past 5 years. The arrangements you've created are legally sound, but they're also entirely voluntary. You have no legal obligation to continue this support, and you can terminate these arrangements at any time with appropriate notice. What constitutes appropriate notice in this situation? 30 days for most of the arrangements you've described, 60 days for more complex commitments like loan guarantees or investment backing. The key is documenting your withdrawal properly and ensuring that all parties have sufficient time to make alternative arrangements. Marcus reviewed Diana's spreadsheets and timeline projections, offering suggestions for managing the process efficiently while protecting Diana from potential legal claims or disputes. Diana, I need to ask you about your family's likely response to this withdrawal. Do you anticipate any attempts to claim legal rights to your continued support or challenges to your decision to terminate these arrangements? Quote, Diana thought about her conversations with Margaret and Robert and their arguments about family obligations and their parents' welfare. I think they'll try to use emotional manipulation and guilt to convince me to continue the support. But I don't think they'll pursue legal action because that would require acknowledging the arrangements publicly, which would embarrass my parents and damage the family's social reputation. That's probably accurate. But, Diana, you should be prepared for the possibility that your family's financial situation is worse than you realize, and that your withdrawal of support could trigger more serious consequences than anyone anticipates. Marcus was right. Diana's careful analysis and gradual withdrawal timeline was based on assumptions about her family's financial resources and alternatives that might not reflect the actual situation. If the Westmont family's dependence on her support was more extensive than she understood, removing that support could create immediate crises rather than manageable adjustment. Wednesday evening, Diana received a call from an unexpected source, her father, Robert Westmont Sr. In 34 years, her father had never called Diana directly about anything. All family communication was handled through Patricia, with Robert Sr. participating primarily as a background presence during visits and family gatherings. "Diana, your mother and I need to speak with you about a family matter that has come to our attention. Can you come to the house tomorrow evening for dinner?" The formal tone and specific language suggested that Robert Sr. was speaking from notes or following a script that Patricia had prepared. Diana realized that her siblings had informed their parents about the financial arrangements and their potential termination. "What family matter would that be, Dad?" Quote, "It's complicated, and it requires discussion in person. Can you be here Thursday at 7 o'clock? Diana understood that this dinner invitation was not a social gesture or an attempt at reconciliation. It was a negotiation meeting disguised as a family gathering, designed to pressure her into continuing financial support that the family had decided was essential to their welfare. "Dad, I was told Sunday that I wasn't welcome in the family home because I wasn't real family. Now you're inviting me to dinner to discuss family matters. Help me understand what has changed." There was a long pause before Robert Sr. responded. "Diana, we need to resolve this situation before it becomes more complicated than it already is." The conversation was brief and formal, with Robert Sr. providing no additional information about the nature of the family matter or the reason for the sudden interest in Diana's presence. But Diana understood that the family's comfortable complacency about their financial security had been shattered, and they were now scrambling to maintain arrangements they had never fully understood. Diana agreed to attend Thursday's dinner, not because she intended to resume her financial support, but because she wanted to witness her family's response to understanding their actual dependence on the daughter they had dismissed as irrelevant and unworthy of their respect. The phone call that would change everything was still 24 hours away, but Diana Walsh was no longer the same person who had stood in her family's driveway Easter morning, hoping for acceptance and belonging. She had become someone who understood her own value and was prepared to require that others recognize it as well. The descent into crisis was about to begin for the Westmont family. For Diana, the ascent toward self-respect and independence had already started. Thursday evening arrived with the crisp clarity that April brings to New England, and Diana Walsh found herself driving the familiar route from Boston to Millbrook for the second time in 1 week. The difference between this journey and her Easter morning visit was profound. 4 days earlier, she had traveled with hope and a carefully wrapped gift, seeking acceptance and belonging. Now she drove with documentation, legal counsel notes, and the quiet confidence that comes from understanding exactly where you stand. The Westmont estate looked identical to how it had appeared Sunday morning, but Diana's perception had fundamentally shifted. The manicured lawns, elegant stonework, and impressive architectural details no longer represented the family sanctuary where she had hoped to belong. Instead, they served as visible evidence of a lifestyle that had been sustained through her invisible financial contributions, while she was simultaneously excluded from the family circle those contributions protected. Diana parked in the circular driveway and gathered her materials: a leather portfolio containing financial documents, a timeline for withdrawing her support arrangements, and alternative resource suggestions that might help her family transition to sustainable independence. She had prepared for this meeting with the same systematic thoroughness that characterized her documentary production work, anticipating various arguments and emotional manipulations, while remaining focused on her core objective of establishing clear boundaries based on mutual respect. Patricia Westmont answered the door with a warmth that Diana had not experienced since childhood. The contrast with Sunday's cold rejection was so stark that it felt almost theatrical, as if her mother were performing the role of welcoming hostess for an audience, rather than expressing genuine sentiment. "Diana, how wonderful that you could join us for dinner. Come in, come in. Everyone is so looking forward to seeing you." The dining room had been set with the formal china and crystal typically reserved for special occasions and important guests. Fresh flowers adorned the centerpiece, candles provided warm lighting, and the overall atmosphere suggested celebration rather than crisis management. Diana recognized the careful staging designed to create emotional warmth and family unity, making her withdrawal of support appear selfish and destructive. in contrast to the harmonious gathering her absence would supposedly ruin. Margaret and Robert Jr. were already seated, both dressed in business attire that reinforced their professional credentials and social standing. Their expressions carried the careful neutrality of people prepared for difficult negotiations. Robert Sr. stood when Diana entered, extending his hand in a formal greeting that felt more appropriate for meeting a business associate than welcoming his daughter. "Diana, thank you for making time to join us this evening. Please, sit here." Robert Sr. indicated the chair directly across from Patricia, positioning Diana where she would face maximum visual contact with her mother during the conversation ahead. The first 30 minutes proceeded as a carefully orchestrated family dinner, complete with conversation about professional developments, social events, and community activities. Margaret discussed a significant legal case her firm had recently won. Robert Jr. described his promotion to senior vice president and the expanded responsibilities that came with his new position. Patricia shared updates about her various charitable committee involvement and social obligations. Diana participated politely but recognized the strategic purpose behind this seemingly normal family interaction. Each family member was demonstrating their social value, professional accomplishments, and community contributions. The implicit message was that these achievements justified their lifestyle and social position, making Diana's financial support not charity but appropriate recognition of their inherent worth and societal importance. When the main course was cleared and coffee was served, Robert Sr. assumed the role of family spokesman with the gravity of someone delivering prepared remarks. "Diana, we asked you here tonight because certain information has come to our attention regarding financial arrangements that apparently involve you in various aspects of our family expenses and obligations. We need to understand the extent of these arrangements and discuss appropriate ways to handle this situation going forward." The formal language and passive voice construction were clearly intended to minimize the family's role in creating their financial dependence, while avoiding direct acknowledgement that Diana had been supporting them extensively without recognition or appreciation. Diana opened her portfolio and removed copies of the documentation she had prepared. "I brought comprehensive information about the financial arrangements I have maintained over the past 5 years, along with my timeline for terminating these arrangements and suggestions for alternative resources you might pursue." She distributed copies of her analysis to each family member, watching their faces as they began reviewing the detailed breakdown of exactly how much money Diana had contributed to maintaining their lifestyle and social position. The silence that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes as each person processed the scope and sophistication of Diana's support system. Margaret, with her legal background, was the first to speak. "Diana, according to this documentation, you have provided nearly $250,000 in direct and indirect financial assistance over the past 5 years. Property taxes, maintenance contracts, insurance premiums, utility subsidies, and what appears to be guarantee backing for various loans and investment obligations." Quote, "That is correct." Robert Jr. looked up from his copy with the expression of someone reviewing a corporate financial statement that revealed hidden liabilities. "Diana, some of these arrangements are structured in ways that make them difficult to trace back to individual funding sources. How did you manage to provide this level of support without any of us understanding where it was coming from?" Diana had anticipated this question and prepared a clear explanation. "I worked with financial and legal professionals to create arrangements that would preserve your dignity and independence while ensuring that essential expenses were covered. The goal was to provide assistance without creating feelings of dependence or obligation." Patricia set down her copy and fixed Diana with the direct gaze she typically reserved for serious disciplinary conversations. "Diana, what you are describing sounds like deception. You allowed us to believe we were managing our financial obligations independently, when in reality we were being subsidized without our knowledge or consent." Diana felt the familiar pattern of being criticized for the method of her assistance, rather than receiving acknowledgement for the assistance itself. This response confirmed her decision to withdraw support, rather than continue arrangements that were clearly not appreciated or respected. "Mother, I provided financial assistance during a period when the family was experiencing difficulties following the economic downturn. I structured this assistance in ways designed to preserve everyone's pride and autonomy. If you prefer to characterize this as deception, that is your choice. But it does not change the fact that this assistance prevented serious financial difficulties for the family." Robert Sr. leaned forward with the expression of someone moving from preliminary discussion to serious negotiation, Diana, regardless of how these arrangements began, the current situation is that terminating them abruptly would create significant hardship for your mother and me. We need to discuss reasonable timelines and alternative solutions that protect everyone's interests. Diana recognized the subtle shift in language from criticism of her methods to acknowledgement of dependence on her support. This progression validated her analysis that the family's response would focus on maintaining their financial security, rather than addressing the relationship issues that had prompted her decision to withdraw support. I have prepared a 90-day timeline for gradually reducing and terminating my financial contributions. This should provide sufficient time to make alternative arrangements or adjust expenses to match available resources. Margaret shook her head immediately. Diana, 90 days is not realistic. Some of these financial obligations require longer-term planning and coordination. Property tax commitments, insurance policies, and loan guarantees cannot be restructured or replaced in 3 months. Margaret, I've been providing this support voluntarily for 5 years without any formal agreements or legal obligations. I can terminate these arrangements at any time with appropriate notice, which I am providing through this timeline. Robert Jr. adopted the reasonable tone he used during business negotiations, when trying to find mutually acceptable solutions to complex problems. Diana, let's approach this systematically. What would it take for you to continue these arrangements on a more formal basis? If we created proper documentation and recognition of your contributions, would you be willing to maintain the support structure? Diana realized that Robert Jr. was attempting to convert her anonymous assistance into a formal family loan or investment arrangement, which would provide legal structure, while maintaining her financial obligation to the family. This approach would address the documentation concerns while perpetuating the fundamental dynamic that Diana was seeking to change. Robert, the issue is not the formal structure of these arrangements. The issue is that I was told Sunday that I am not real family and do not belong with people who have accomplished meaningful things in their lives. Now you are asking me to continue providing substantial financial support to people who do not consider me worthy of sharing holiday meals with them. The room fell silent as Diana's statement connected the Easter incident directly to her decision about financial support. Until this moment, the family had been treating these as separate issues, with the dinner exclusion being characterized as a social misunderstanding, while the financial arrangements were presented as a family business matter requiring practical solutions. Patricia responded first, with the tone of someone addressing an unreasonable interpretation of innocent events. Diana, what happened Sunday was unfortunate, but it was based on practical considerations about the social dynamic and guest list, not on any assessment of your worth or value as a family member. Mother, you specifically told me that the Easter gathering was for real family and people who have built something meaningful with their lives. You said I would not fit the dynamic you were trying to create with accomplished people. These were your exact words. Margaret attempted to provide legal precision to Patricia's explanation. Diana, you are taking those comments out of context. Mother was referring to the specific social situation and guest arrangements, not making general statements about your role in the family. Diana retrieved a small recording device from her portfolio and placed it on the table. I recorded our conversation Sunday morning because I wanted to ensure that I remembered your words accurately when I made decisions about my future relationship with the family. Would you like me to play the relevant portions? The appearance of recorded evidence shifted the dynamic immediately. Margaret and Robert Jr. exchanged glances that suggested professional concern about potential legal implications. Patricia stared at the device with the expression of someone realizing that her words had been preserved in a format that could not be reinterpreted or minimized. Robert Sr. spoke carefully, understanding that the conversation was now being documented. Diana, I think there may have been misunderstandings and miscommunications that have created unnecessary conflict. The important thing now is to find solutions that work for everyone involved. Diana appreciated her father's diplomatic approach, but recognized that he was attempting to resolve the immediate financial crisis without addressing the underlying relationship issues that had created the situation. Dad, the solution that works for me is to establish clear boundaries based on mutual respect. I am willing to continue providing financial assistance to family members who treat me with the same consideration and respect they show to other people they value and appreciate. Patricia's response revealed the core of her perspective on the situation. Diana, you are asking us to pretend that Sunday never happened and continue as if everything is normal between us. But you cannot use financial support as leverage to control family relationships or force social acceptance. Diana realized that Patricia had fundamentally misunderstood her position. The issue was not using money to control relationships, but rather refusing to provide money to people who explicitly rejected relationship with her. Mother, I am not trying to control anything. I am simply declining to continue financial arrangements with people who have clearly stated that they do not consider me real family. If you want to redefine our relationship based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation, I am open to that discussion. But I will not continue being treated as a financial resource rather than a family member. The conversation continued for another hour, with various family members proposing compromise solutions that would maintain Diana's financial contributions while addressing her concerns about respect and recognition. These proposals included formal acknowledgement of her support, public recognition of her professional achievements, and guaranteed inclusion in future family events and celebrations. Diana listened carefully to each suggestion, but recognized that they all focused on managing her feelings rather than changing the fundamental family dynamic. The underlying assumption remained that Diana should continue providing financial support, while the family made minimal adjustments to accommodate her emotional needs. As the evening concluded, Diana presented her final position with the clarity that comes from thorough preparation and absolute certainty about principles. I appreciate everyone's willingness to discuss this situation, and I understand the financial implications of my decision. However, I will not continue providing financial support to people who fundamentally view me as a resource rather than a family member. You have 90 days to make alternative arrangements. I will honor existing commitments during this transition period, but I will not enter into any new financial obligations or extend any current arrangements beyond the specified timeline. Diana gathered her materials and prepared to leave, but Patricia made one final attempt to maintain the family's financial security. Diana, if you proceed with this decision, you will be responsible for whatever hardships result from the sudden termination of arrangements that we had no role in creating. Is that really the legacy you want to leave with this family? Quote, Diana paused at the dining room entrance and looked back at her mother with the calm expression of someone who had finally achieved complete clarity about their situation. Mother, the legacy I want to leave is that Diana Walsh was someone who understood her own worth and required others to recognize it as well. I spent 34 years trying to earn acceptance and appreciation from people who were incapable of providing either. I will not spend the next 34 years making the same mistake. Diana left the estate that evening with a sense of liberation she had never experienced. For the first time in her adult life, she had clearly articulated her boundaries and requirements, rather than hoping that her contributions would eventually earn recognition and respect. The drive back to Boston provided time to process what she had learned about her family's character and priorities. Their response to her decision confirmed that they viewed her primarily as a financial asset rather than a person deserving of consideration and appreciation. Even when faced with losing substantial support, their focus had been on negotiating continued access to her resources, rather than addressing the relationship issues that had prompted her decision. Diana understood that the next phase would involve the family experiencing the full consequences of their financial dependence, while simultaneously testing various strategies to convince her to resume her support role. But she also knew that she had crossed a psychological threshold that could not be uncrossed. She would never again sacrifice her self-respect for family acceptance, or provide assistance to people who did not value her contributions. The transformation from invisible supporter to independent individual was complete. Diana Walsh had become someone who measured her worth by her own standards, rather than seeking validation from people who were fundamentally incapable of providing it. The crisis that would unfold over the next 60 days would test her resolve, but it would also demonstrate the power that comes from understanding exactly who you are and what you will and will not accept from others. Friday morning brought the first tangible evidence that the Westmont family's financial situation was more precarious than Diana had initially understood. Her decision to terminate the support arrangements had triggered a cascade of consequences that revealed the true extent of their dependence on her invisible assistance. What began as a principled stance about respect and recognition was evolving into a comprehensive analysis of how deeply financial deception had penetrated the family's operations. Diana received the first indication of crisis at 7:30 a.m. when her business phone rang with a call from Hartford Municipal Services, the city department responsible for property tax collection and enforcement. The caller identified himself as Thomas Mitchell, a senior collections officer who had been trying to reach the Westmont family about overdue property tax obligations. Ms. Walsh, we have your contact information listed as the designated representative for the Westmont Estate property tax account. We need to discuss immediate resolution of outstanding obligations that are now 60 days past due. Diana had structured the property tax arrangements through her business entity to ensure payments were processed efficiently while maintaining the family's privacy. The system had functioned seamlessly for 5 years, with quarterly payments being made automatically through pre-authorized transfers from Diana's business accounts to the municipal tax system. Mr. Mitchell, I am in the process of terminating my role as designated representative for that account. The property owners should be contacted directly about any outstanding obligations. Ms. Walsh, the outstanding balance is $47,000, representing current year assessments plus penalties and interest. The property owners listed no alternative payment arrangements when your automatic payments were discontinued last week. Without immediate resolution, we will need to begin foreclosure proceedings within 30 days. Diana realized that her systematic withdrawal of financial support had created immediate rather than gradual consequences. The automated systems she had established were more interconnected than she had appreciated, and terminating one arrangement had triggered failures in multiple other areas simultaneously. Mr. Mitchell, please send all future correspondence directly to Robert and Patricia Westmont at the property address. I am no longer responsible for any obligations related to that account. After ending the call, Diana understood that the 90-day transition timeline she had outlined during Thursday's dinner meeting was already proving unrealistic. Her family's financial obligations were structured in ways that required immediate attention rather than gradual adjustment, and the consequences of her withdrawal would be felt within days rather than months. The second indication of crisis came through Margaret's call at 9:15 a.m. Margaret's voice carried the controlled panic of someone managing multiple emergency situations simultaneously while maintaining professional composure. Diana, we need to meet immediately. The situation is more complex than any of us realized, and we have less than 2 weeks to prevent catastrophic consequences for Mom and Dad. Margaret explained that her review of the family's financial situation had revealed obligations and commitments that extended far beyond basic household expenses. Property taxes, insurance policies, loan guarantees, and business investment backing created a web of financial dependencies that could not be unwound gradually without triggering default situations and potential bankruptcy. Diana, according to the documentation I have been able to gather, you have been serving as collateral or guarantee backing for business loans, investment accounts, and insurance policies that total nearly $600,000 in potential liability. If your backing is withdrawn simultaneously, every one of these arrangements could be called in immediately. Diana felt her understanding of the situation shift fundamentally. She had focused on her direct financial contributions without fully appreciating how her creditworthiness and business assets had been leveraged to support the family's broader financial activities. Her parents and siblings had not simply been receiving her money. They had been using her financial standing as foundation for building their own credit and investment capabilities. Margaret, I was never informed that my financial backing was being used for multiple business and investment purposes. How did these arrangements come to exist without my explicit knowledge and consent? Diana, some of these arrangements date back to the period immediately following Dad's business difficulties in 2008. You provided financial assistance and credit backing during the crisis, but those arrangements were never formally terminated or modified as the family's situation stabilized. Over time, additional obligations were added using the existing framework. Diana realized that her family had exploited her generosity and financial stability to create a complex web of dependencies that went far beyond the straightforward assistance she had intended to provide. Her decision to help during a temporary crisis had been converted into permanent financial infrastructure, supporting multiple business and personal obligations. Margaret, I need comprehensive documentation of every arrangement that involves my credit, assets, or financial backing. I also need legal analysis of my obligations and exposure in each situation. Diana, I have been working on that analysis since Tuesday. The scope is larger than what any of us understood, including you. Can we meet at my office today? I have conference rooms available, and we can review everything systematically. Diana agreed to meet Margaret at Morrison Caldwell & Associates that afternoon. The morning was spent reviewing her own financial records and business documentation to identify every connection between her assets and the Westmont family operations. The process revealed the sophisticated ways her financial resources had been integrated into arrangements she had never fully understood or explicitly approved. The pattern that emerged was both clever and ethically questionable. During the 2008 crisis, Diana had provided emergency assistance through various formal and informal arrangements designed to help her family maintain their lifestyle and business operations while economic conditions stabilized. However, instead of terminating these arrangements as conditions improved, the family had used them as foundation for additional borrowing, investing, and business development. Diana's credit rating, business assets, and financial backing had been leveraged to support property acquisitions, business loans, investment accounts, and insurance policies that created ongoing obligations extending far beyond her original assistance. The family had effectively used her financial stability as collateral for building their own expanded operations without informing her about the scope or implications of this dependency. The meeting at Margaret's law firm began at 2 p.m. in a conference room designed for complex business negotiations. Margaret had prepared comprehensive documentation that revealed the full extent of Diana's financial entanglement with family operations. The analysis was presented with the professional thoroughness that made Margaret a successful corporate attorney, but the implications were personally devastating. Diana, based on my review of available records, your financial backing supports 17 separate business and personal arrangements totaling approximately $1.2 million in potential exposure. These include property mortgages, business loans, investment account guarantees, insurance policies, and various credit arrangements that use your assets or creditworthiness as primary or secondary backing. Diana stared at the summary document Margaret had prepared. The scope of her financial involvement was orders of magnitude larger than she had understood. Her intention to provide temporary assistance during family difficulties had been converted into permanent infrastructure, supporting a lifestyle and business activities that would be impossible to maintain without her continued backing. Margaret, how is this level of financial involvement possible without my explicit knowledge and ongoing consent? Some of these arrangements appear to have been established or modified within the past 2 years. Margaret's expression indicated professional discomfort with the ethical implications of what her analysis had revealed. Diana, the arrangements were structured using powers of attorney, business partnership agreements, and family trust documentation that provided authority for financial decisions to be made on your behalf without requiring your individual approval for each transaction. Diana realized that legal documents she had signed to facilitate family assistance during the economic crisis had been used as foundation for ongoing financial manipulation that extended far beyond their original purpose. Her family had exploited her trust and generosity to create dependency relationships that would be difficult to terminate without significant legal and financial consequences. Margaret, what are my legal obligations in these situations? Can I withdraw my backing unilaterally, or am I bound by existing commitments until specific terms are fulfilled? Diana, the legal situation is complex and varies by arrangement. Some of these commitments can be terminated with appropriate notice, but others are structured as long-term guarantees that cannot be withdrawn without full satisfaction of underlying obligations. The total amount required to terminate all arrangements immediately would be approximately $800,000. Diana understood that her principled decision to withdraw family support had evolved into a complex legal and financial situation requiring sophisticated resolution strategies. Her family's dependence on her financial backing was not simply a matter of monthly assistance that could be terminated gradually. It represented fundamental infrastructure that would collapse without comprehensive replacement or full settlement of all obligations. Margaret, What happens if I decline to continue these arrangements and also decline to provide the funds necessary to terminate them immediately? Margaret consulted her legal analysis and spoke with the professional directness required when delivering serious consequences to clients. Diana, the most likely outcome would be cascading defaults across multiple financial obligations, resulting in property foreclosures, business bankruptcies, and potential personal liability for family members who are named as primary borrowers in arrangements backed by your guarantee. The scope of potential consequences was sobering. Diana's decision to establish boundaries with family members who did not respect her contributions had evolved into a situation where her withdrawal could cause comprehensive financial devastation for people who had built their entire lifestyle around access to her resources. Margaret, I need to understand how this situation developed without my knowledge. Who had authority to establish these arrangements using my financial backing? Margaret reviewed the legal documentation that provided foundation for the various arrangements. Diana, the authority derives primarily from business partnership agreements you signed in 2009 and updated in 2012, giving Robert Jr. and Dad discretion to make investment and financial decisions on behalf of Westmont Family Holdings, the business entity that owns various family assets and serves as vehicle for coordinated financial activities. Diana remembered signing those documents as part of helping the family restructure their business operations following the economic crisis. She had viewed them as temporary administrative arrangements that would facilitate recovery efforts while maintaining family control over business decisions. She had not anticipated that they would be used as ongoing authority for leveraging her assets in support of expanding family financial activities. Margaret, I want these partnership agreements terminated immediately, along with any authority for other family members to make financial commitments using my resources or creditworthiness as backing. Diana, terminating the partnership agreements will trigger review of all related financial arrangements and could result in immediate demands for full settlement of guaranteed obligations. The other parties have 30 days to demand buyout of your partnership interests at fair market value, or to require assumption of your proportional share of all partnership debts and obligations. Diana realized that extricating herself from the family financial arrangements would require either substantial payment to settle existing obligations or acceptance of ongoing exposure to financial commitments she had never fully understood or explicitly approved. Her decision to establish boundaries based on respect and recognition had uncovered a web of financial manipulation that would be expensive and complex to resolve. Margaret, I need you to prepare a comprehensive legal strategy for terminating my involvement in all family financial arrangements, while minimizing my exposure to ongoing obligations. I also need analysis of potential legal claims related to the use of my financial resources and creditworthiness without my explicit informed consent. Margaret made detailed notes about Diana's requirements and outlined the legal research and analysis that would be necessary to develop effective resolution strategies. The process would require several weeks of investigation and documentation to identify all relevant arrangements and determine optimal approaches for each situation. Diana, I need to ask about your ultimate objectives in this situation. Are you seeking to minimize financial exposure while maintaining family relationships? Or are you prepared to pursue legal remedies if family members have exceeded their authority or misused your financial resources? Diana considered the question carefully. Her original intention had been to establish boundaries that required family respect and recognition of her contributions. However, the discovery of extensive financial manipulation suggested more serious issues related to trust, consent, and potentially fraudulent use of her resources. Margaret, my primary objective is to establish financial independence from family members who have demonstrated that they view me as a resource rather than a person deserving of respect and consideration. If achieving that independence requires legal action to address unauthorized use of my financial backing, I am prepared to pursue appropriate remedies. Margaret understood that Diana had moved beyond seeking family reconciliation to requiring comprehensive resolution of financial entanglements that had been created without her full knowledge or explicit ongoing consent. The legal strategy would need to address both immediate termination of financial exposure and potential recovery of resources that had been used inappropriately. The meeting concluded with Diana authorizing comprehensive legal analysis of all family financial arrangements and development of strategies for achieving complete financial independence within the shortest possible time frame. The cost and complexity would be substantial, but Diana understood that establishing authentic boundaries required addressing the financial manipulation that had made those boundaries necessary. That evening, Diana sat in her Boston apartment reviewing the documentation Margaret had provided and contemplating the scope of financial deception that had characterized her family relationships for more than a decade. Her generous assistance during a family crisis had been converted into permanent financial infrastructure that supported lifestyle and business activities far beyond what any of them could afford independently. The motivational lesson was clear, but painful. Generosity without boundaries creates opportunities for exploitation by people who measure relationships primarily through financial benefit, rather than genuine appreciation and respect. Diana's attempt to help her family while preserving their dignity had been interpreted as permission for ongoing financial manipulation that served their interests while increasing her exposure and obligations. However, Diana also recognized that discovering the full extent of the financial manipulation provided clarity about the nature of her family relationships and the importance of establishing authentic independence. The legal and financial challenges ahead would be significant, but they represented the price of freedom from relationships based on utility, rather than genuine connection and mutual respect. Diana Walsh had evolved from someone seeking family acceptance to someone requiring complete autonomy from family members who had demonstrated their willingness to exploit her resources while simultaneously rejecting her personal worth. The battle ahead would be complex and expensive, but it would result in the independence and self-respect that had been missing from her life for more than 30 years. Monday morning brought an unexpected development that would fundamentally alter Diana's approach to resolving the complex financial entanglements with her family. The call came at 8:30 a.m. from Jonathan Hartwell, senior partner at Hartwell Strategic Advisory, one of Boston's most respected corporate investigation and asset recovery firms. His voice carried the professional authority that comes from decades of experience managing high-stakes financial disputes involving family businesses and personal wealth protection. Ms. Walsh, I received your contact information from Margaret Westmont, who mentioned that you might benefit from specialized assistance regarding complex financial arrangements and potential asset recovery issues. I have reviewed preliminary documentation that suggests your situation involves sophisticated financial structures that require careful analysis and strategic resolution. Diana had not expected Margaret to recommend outside expertise, particularly from a firm that specialized in investigating financial misconduct and recovering misappropriated assets. This development suggested that Margaret's legal analysis had revealed concerns that extended beyond simple family financial disputes into potential areas of professional misconduct or fraudulent asset manipulation. Mr. Hartwell, what specific aspects of my situation would fall within your firm's expertise? Jonathan's response demonstrated the thoroughness that had made his firm successful in complex corporate and family wealth disputes. Ms. Walsh, based on the preliminary information I have received, your situation appears to involve unauthorized use of personal creditworthiness and financial backing to support business and investment activities that may exceed the scope of documented agreements. These circumstances often involve questions of consent, disclosure, and fiduciary responsibility that require specialized investigation and resolution strategies. Diana understood that Jonathan was describing her family's financial activities in professional terms that suggested potential legal violations rather than simple family disagreements about money management. His firm's involvement indicated that the situation had evolved beyond personal relationship issues into areas that required corporate-level investigation and asset protection strategies. Mr. Hartwell, I would be interested in understanding how your firm would approach analyzing and resolving this type of situation. Ms. Walsh, our process begins with comprehensive forensic analysis of all financial arrangements, business structures, and asset transfers to determine the scope of unauthorized activities and identify potential recovery opportunities. We then develop strategic resolution plans that protect your interests while minimizing exposure to ongoing obligations and potential legal complications. Diana scheduled a meeting with Jonathan for Tuesday morning at Hartwell Strategic Advisory's offices in downtown Boston. The firm's reputation for handling complex family wealth disputes and corporate financial investigations provided confidence that her situation would receive the professional expertise and strategic thinking required for effective resolution. The Hartwell Strategic Advisory offices occupied 3 floors of a historic building in Boston's financial district, with conference rooms designed for confidential discussions involving sensitive financial matters. Jonathan Hartwell was a distinguished man in his early 60s who projected the quiet competence that comes from successfully managing complex disputes for wealthy families and major corporations throughout his career. Ms. Walsh, I have reviewed the documentation that Margaret Westmont provided, and I have identified several areas of concern that warrant immediate investigation and strategic response. Before we proceed, I need to understand your primary objectives in this situation and your tolerance for potential legal action against family members if such action becomes necessary to protect your interests. Diana appreciated Jonathan's direct approach to discussing the implications and potential consequences of pursuing comprehensive resolution of the financial manipulation she had discovered. His professional experience provided perspective on how family financial disputes typically evolved and the strategic considerations that determine successful outcomes. Mr. Hartwell, my primary objective is to achieve complete financial independence from family members who have demonstrated that they view me as a resource rather than a person deserving of respect and consideration. I am prepared to pursue whatever legal remedies become necessary to protect my assets and terminate my involvement in arrangements that were established or expanded without my explicit informed consent. Jonathan made detailed notes regarding Diana's objectives and tolerance for aggressive legal strategies. His questions and responses indicated familiarity with similar situations involving family members who had exploited trust relationships to create unauthorized financial obligations and dependencies. Ms. Walsh, based on the preliminary documentation, I have identified 3 primary areas that require immediate investigation. First, the extent to which your financial backing has been used to support business and investment activities that exceed the scope of documented agreements. Second, whether family members had appropriate legal authority to establish financial commitments using your creditworthiness and assets as collateral. Third, the current market value of business interests and assets that have been developed using your financial contributions. Diana understood that Jonathan was describing a comprehensive investigation that would determine not only how her financial resources had been used without her knowledge, but also whether she had legal claims to business assets and investments that had been developed through her backing. This approach suggested opportunities for asset recovery that could compensate for the financial manipulation she had experienced. Mr. Hartwell, what timeline would be required for conducting this investigation and developing strategic recommendations? Ms. Walsh, the forensic analysis phase typically requires 6 to 8 weeks for comprehensive review of business records, financial statements, asset transfers, and legal documentation. The strategic planning and implementation phase depends on the complexity of issues identified during the investigation, but generally requires an additional 4 to 6 weeks to execute resolution strategies effectively. Jonathan outlined the specific areas his investigation would address, beginning with forensic accounting analysis of all business entities and financial arrangements that involved Diana's backing or creditworthiness. This analysis would determine the extent of unauthorized asset use and identify potential recovery opportunities based on business assets developed through her financial contributions. The second phase would involve legal analysis of all partnership agreements, financial guarantees, and business structure documentation to determine whether family members had exceeded their authority or violated fiduciary responsibilities in establishing financial commitments using Diana's resources. The third phase would focus on strategic resolution planning, developing approaches for terminating Diana's involvement in unauthorized arrangements, while maximizing asset recovery opportunities and minimizing ongoing exposure to financial obligations she had never explicitly approved. Ms. Walsh, I need to discuss the potential costs associated with this investigation and resolution process. Our fees for comprehensive forensic analysis and strategic resolution typically range from $75,000 to $125,000, depending on the complexity of issues identified and the scope of legal action required to achieve your objectives. Diana understood that professional resolution of sophisticated financial manipulation would require substantial investment in expert analysis and legal strategy. However, the potential asset recovery opportunities and the importance of achieving authentic financial independence justified the expense involved in comprehensive resolution. Mr. Hartwell, please proceed with the investigation. I want complete analysis of all financial arrangements and aggressive pursuit of asset recovery opportunities where appropriate. Jonathan provided Diana with engagement documentation and outlined the information gathering process that would begin immediately. His firm would require access to all financial records, business documentation, and legal agreements related to Diana's involvement in family financial arrangements over the past 15 years. Ms. Walsh, I need to advise you that this investigation will likely reveal information about family business activities and financial practices that may be disturbing or disappointing. Family members who have engaged in unauthorized use of financial resources often respond defensively when their activities are investigated professionally, and may attempt to characterize asset recovery efforts as vindictive or unreasonable. Quote, Diana appreciated Jonathan's warning about the emotional challenges that would accompany professional investigation of family financial manipulation. However, her experience with the Easter exclusion and the subsequent discovery of extensive unauthorized financial arrangements had already demonstrated that her family's priorities and character differed significantly from what she had previously believed. Mr. Hartwell, I understand that this process may reveal uncomfortable truths about family members I trusted. However, I have already learned that these relationships were based on utility rather than genuine connection and mutual respect. Discovering the full extent of financial manipulation will provide clarity about the nature of these relationships and the importance of establishing complete independence. The meeting concluded with Diana authorizing comprehensive investigation and aggressive pursuit of asset recovery opportunities where appropriate. Jonathan's professional expertise and strategic approach provided confidence that her situation would receive the thorough analysis and effective resolution strategies required for achieving authentic financial independence. Wednesday morning brought the first indication that Diana's decision to engage professional assistance was creating anxiety among family members who had previously viewed her concerns as manageable through negotiation and emotional manipulation. Margaret called at 7:45 a.m. with urgency that suggested developments had occurred since their meeting at Morrison, Caldwell & Associates. Diana, I need to know why you engaged Hartwell Strategic Advisory to investigate family financial arrangements. Their reputation for aggressive asset recovery and forensic analysis suggests that you are preparing for serious legal action against family members. Diana recognized that Margaret's professional network had provided information about Jonathan Hartwell's involvement and the implications for family members who might have exceeded their authority in managing Diana's financial backing. This development confirmed that the investigation would receive the serious attention and strategic response required for effective resolution. Margaret, I engaged professional assistance because the scope of financial manipulation I discovered requires expertise beyond what family negotiation can address effectively. I need comprehensive analysis of all arrangements that involve my financial resources and aggressive pursuit of asset recovery where appropriate. Diana, hiring forensic accountants and asset recovery specialists suggests that you believe family members have committed financial misconduct or fraud. These are serious accusations that could have legal consequences for people who are trying to help manage family business affairs during difficult economic circumstances. Diana understood that Margaret was attempting to reframe the unauthorized use of Diana's financial backing as well-intentioned family assistance rather than financial manipulation that exceeded documented authority and violated principles of informed consent. This response confirmed that family members understood the potential legal implications of their activities and were beginning to prepare defensive strategies. Margaret, the issue is not whether family members had good intentions, but whether they had appropriate authority to establish financial commitments using my creditworthiness and assets as backing without my explicit ongoing consent. Professional investigation will determine the extent of unauthorized activities and identify appropriate remedies. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, with Margaret attempting to convince Diana that professional investigation was excessive and unnecessary for resolving what she characterized as family business disputes that could be addressed through internal negotiation and compromise. Her arguments suggested concern about potential legal exposure and asset recovery claims that could result from comprehensive forensic analysis. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected development that validated Diana's decision to pursue professional investigation, rather than relying on family negotiations to resolve the financial manipulation she had discovered. Robert Jr. called to request an immediate meeting to discuss what he described as urgent business matters that required Diana's attention and approval before external investigators could complicate the resolution process. Diana, I need to discuss business partnership and financial arrangement modifications that could resolve your concerns about authority and consent while maintaining the family business structures that have been developed over the past several years. These modifications would provide formal recognition of your contributions and establish clear documentation of your role in ongoing business activities. Quote, Diana understood that Robert Jr. was proposing to legitimize previously unauthorized financial arrangements through retroactive documentation and formal recognition of her role in supporting business activities. This approach would address the consent and disclosure issues identified by professional investigation while maintaining the financial structures that supported family business operations. Robert, I am not interested in legitimizing arrangements that were established without my explicit knowledge and informed consent. I want complete termination of my involvement in family business activities and recovery of assets that have been developed using my financial contributions. Diana, the business assets and investment returns that have been developed through coordinated family financial activities represent millions of dollars in value that would be destroyed if partnership arrangements are terminated abruptly. These assets provide ongoing returns that benefit everyone involved, including you. Diana realized that Robert Jr. was revealing the extent of business assets that had been developed using her financial backing, information that had not been disclosed during previous family discussions about financial arrangements. This development confirmed that professional investigation was necessary to determine the full scope of asset recovery opportunities. Robert, I was never informed about business assets worth millions of dollars that were developed using my financial backing. This disclosure confirms that comprehensive investigation is necessary to determine the extent of unauthorized activities and my legal rights to assets that were developed through my contributions. The call concluded with Robert Jr. expressing concern about potential legal complications and asset recovery claims that could result from professional investigation of family business activities. His anxiety about external scrutiny suggested that forensic analysis would reveal additional financial manipulation beyond what Diana had already discovered through her own research and Margaret's legal review. That evening, Diana received a call from Jonathan Hartwell, providing an update on preliminary findings from his firm's investigation into the Westmont family financial arrangements. His report indicated that the initial document review had revealed business and investment activities that exceeded the scope of previously disclosed information. Ms. Walsh, our preliminary analysis has identified business assets and investment holdings valued at approximately $3.7 million that appear to have been developed using financial backing and credit support that traces back to arrangements involving your resources. These assets were not referenced in the documentation you received from Margaret Westmont, suggesting that family members may not have provided complete disclosure about the scope of business activities supported by your financial contributions. Diana understood that Jonathan's preliminary findings confirmed the importance of professional investigation and suggested that asset recovery opportunities were significantly larger than she had anticipated. The discovery of undisclosed business assets worth millions of dollars validated her decision to pursue comprehensive forensic analysis rather than accepting family representations about the scope and value of arrangements involving her financial backing. Mr. Hartwell, what implications do these preliminary findings have for asset recovery and termination of my involvement in family financial arrangements? Ms. Walsh, if our comprehensive analysis confirms that these business assets were developed using your financial contributions without appropriate disclosure and consent, you would have strong legal claims to proportional ownership or compensation based on the value of your contributions. The asset recovery potential could significantly exceed the costs associated with terminating your involvement in ongoing financial obligations. Jonathan's update provided the first indication that Diana's decision to establish financial independence from family members who had exploited her generosity could result in substantial asset recovery that would more than compensate for the costs and complexity of comprehensive resolution. The investigation had evolved from defensive asset protection to potentially lucrative recovery of business assets that had been developed through unauthorized use of her financial resources. Friday morning brought the final development that confirmed Diana's strategic decision to pursue professional resolution, rather than continuing to seek family reconciliation. Patricia called at 6:30 a.m. with the desperate urgency of someone facing immediate crisis and running out of alternatives for avoiding serious consequences. Diana, we need to stop this investigation immediately. These people are threatening everything our family has built, and they are creating legal problems that could destroy all of us. You cannot allow strangers to attack your own family based on misunderstandings about business arrangements that were always intended to benefit everyone involved. Diana recognized that Patricia's panic represented acknowledgement that professional investigation had uncovered financial manipulation that could result in serious legal consequences for family members who had exceeded their authority in using Diana's financial resources. The desperate tone confirmed that comprehensive forensic analysis was revealing activities that family members had hoped would remain hidden or minimized. Mother, the investigation is revealing unauthorized use of my financial backing to develop business assets worth millions of dollars that were never disclosed to me. These are not misunderstandings about business arrangements. These are violations of trust and potentially fraudulent activities that require legal resolution. Patricia's response revealed the desperation of someone who had finally understood that her treatment of Diana at Easter had triggered consequences that threatened everything the family had built through unauthorized use of Diana's financial resources. Diana, please. We made mistakes and we are sorry. But you cannot destroy your entire family because of one difficult conversation. We need you, and we have always needed you. Please stop this investigation before it ruins everyone. Diana heard the words she had waited 34 years to hear from her mother. Acknowledgement of need, recognition of mistakes, and admission that the family had always depended on her contributions. However, these admissions came only after professional investigation had revealed the extent of financial manipulation and the potential consequences for family members who had exploited her generosity while simultaneously rejecting her worth as a person. Mother, you told me at Easter that you did not need me and that I was not real family. You spent 5 years using my financial resources to support business activities worth millions of dollars while excluding me from family gatherings and treating me as irrelevant to your lives. Professional investigation is simply revealing the truth about these relationships and ensuring appropriate resolution of financial arrangements that were established without my informed consent. The conversation ended with Patricia pleading for Diana to consider the family consequences of pursuing comprehensive asset recovery and legal action against people who had been trying to manage family business affairs during difficult circumstances. Her desperation confirmed that the investigation was proceeding effectively and that family members were beginning to understand the serious implications of their unauthorized financial activities. Diana Walsh had evolved from someone seeking family acceptance to someone pursuing justice for financial manipulation that had exploited her generosity while denying her basic respect and recognition. The professional alliance with Jonathan Hartwell had provided the expertise and strategic approach necessary to transform her situation from defensive family negotiation to aggressive asset recovery that would achieve the financial independence and vindication her situation required. The comprehensive forensic analysis conducted by Hartwell Strategic Advisory required 3 weeks to complete, during which Diana maintained her regular documentary production schedule while processing the mounting evidence of financial manipulation that extended far beyond her initial understanding. Each daily briefing from Jonathan Hartwell revealed additional layers of sophisticated exploitation that demonstrated systematic planning, rather than opportunistic advantage-taking during family financial difficulties. The investigation had uncovered a complex web of business entities, shell corporations, and investment vehicles that had been established using Diana's creditworthiness and financial backing as foundational assets. These structures had been created incrementally over a period of 12 years, beginning during the 2008 economic crisis, when Diana had provided emergency assistance, and expanding systematically as family members recognized the opportunities presented by her financial stability and trusting nature. Jonathan scheduled a comprehensive briefing meeting for Monday morning at his firm's offices to present the complete findings and discuss strategic options for asset recovery and legal action. The meeting would include Diana, Jonathan, 2 forensic accountants from his firm, and Margaret Westmont as Diana's additional legal counsel. The inclusion of Margaret in the briefing represented a calculated decision by Diana to provide her sister with opportunity to understand the full scope of financial manipulation before determining whether Margaret had been complicit in the unauthorized activities or merely uninformed about their extent. The Hartwell Strategic Advisory Conference Room had been prepared for a complex financial presentation, with multiple displays showing organizational charts, financial flow diagrams, and asset valuations that illustrated the sophisticated structure of entities and arrangements that had been built using Diana's resources. Jonathan began the briefing with an overview that established the scope and implications of what the investigation had revealed. Ms. Walsh, our comprehensive analysis has identified 14 separate business entities and investment vehicles that were established or expanded using your financial backing as primary capitalization. These entities control assets valued at approximately $4.9 million, generate annual revenue of approximately $700,000, and have received total capitalization from your resources of approximately $900,000 over the 12-year period we examined. Diana absorbed this information while studying the organizational charts that displayed the complex relationships between various business entities and the flow of financial resources from her accounts to support their operations. The sophistication of the structure suggested professional planning and execution rather than informal family business arrangements that had evolved organically during difficult economic circumstances. Jonathan, this appears to represent systematic business development using my financial resources as foundation, rather than temporary assistance during family difficulties. How was this structure created without my knowledge and explicit ongoing consent? Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead forensic accountant on the investigation, provided detailed analysis of how the business structure had been established and expanded incrementally while maintaining Diana's invisibility to the overall architecture. Her expertise in complex corporate investigations provided insight into the methods used to obscure the extent of Diana's financial involvement. Ms. Walsh, the structure was created through a series of seemingly independent transactions and business formation activities that individually appeared reasonable and within documented authority, but collectively represented systematic exploitation of your financial resources to build a coordinated business empire. Each individual transaction was structured to avoid triggering disclosure requirements or consent obligations, while the cumulative effect created substantial unauthorized business development. Dr. Chen explained how the initial emergency assistance Diana had provided in 2008 had been used as seed capital for establishing Westmont Holdings LLC, a family investment entity that served as the foundation for subsequent business development activities. This entity had then leveraged Diana's creditworthiness and continued financial backing to secure additional loans, investment capital, and business partnerships that enabled rapid expansion of business operations across multiple sectors. The individual businesses controlled by Westmont Holdings include real estate investment properties, equipment leasing operations, consulting services, and technology licensing arrangements. Each business was established using partial funding from your financial backing, then expanded through additional borrowing that used your creditworthiness as collateral or guarantee backing. Diana studied the detailed financial statements that showed the performance and asset values of businesses she had inadvertently capitalized through her family assistance. Several of these businesses had become highly profitable operations that generated substantial ongoing revenue for family members, while requiring minimal ongoing management or operational involvement. Dr. Chen, what is the current fair market value of my proportional ownership interest in these business entities based on my financial contributions to their establishment and development? The second forensic accountant, Michael Torres, provided valuation analysis based on standard business appraisal methodologies and comparable transaction data for similar business operations. His calculations demonstrated that Diana's financial contributions had created business assets worth significantly more than the amount of money she had provided over the 12-year period. Ms. Walsh, based on conservative valuation methodologies, your proportional ownership interest in the business entities capitalized through your financial backing would be valued at approximately $2.4 million. This calculation reflects current asset values, accumulated earnings, and projected future revenue streams from established business operations. Diana realized that her financial contributions had been leveraged through sophisticated business development strategies to create assets worth nearly 3 times the amount of money she had provided. The family members she had assisted during their financial difficulties had used her resources to build a business empire that generated substantial ongoing income while maintaining her complete invisibility to the value she had helped create. Michael, does this valuation analysis account for the fact that these businesses would not have been possible without my financial backing serving as foundation capital and ongoing credit support? Ms. Walsh, our valuation analysis assumes that your financial contributions were essential to establishing and developing these business operations, and that fair compensation would reflect the full value created through leveraging your resources. Without your backing, these businesses could not have been established or sustained during their development phases. Jonathan provided legal analysis of Diana's rights and options for recovering the business assets that had been developed through unauthorized use of her financial resources. His assessment indicated that Diana had strong legal claims for either proportional ownership of existing business entities or monetary compensation equivalent to fair market value of her contributed capital. Ms. Walsh, the legal framework for asset recovery depends on whether you prefer to pursue ownership interests in existing business operations or monetary settlement that would provide immediate compensation while terminating your involvement in ongoing business activities. Both approaches have advantages and potential complications that we need to discuss. Diana considered the strategic implications of each approach while reviewing the business performance data and projected future earnings from the various entities that had been built using her financial backing. The businesses were professionally managed and highly profitable, suggesting that maintaining ownership interests could provide substantial ongoing returns on her involuntary investments. Jonathan, I am interested in recovering the maximum value from my financial contributions while achieving complete independence from family members who have demonstrated their willingness to exploit my resources without consent or recognition. Which approach would best achieve both objectives? Jonathan consulted with his forensic accounting team before responding with strategic recommendations that balanced asset recovery objectives with the complexity and potential duration of different resolution approaches. Ms. Walsh, pursuing monetary settlement would provide immediate compensation and clean separation from ongoing business involvement, but might not capture the full value of businesses that continue growing and generating returns. Pursuing ownership interests would provide ongoing participation in business success, but would require continued relationship with family members who serve as business managers and operational leaders. Diana understood that maximizing asset recovery might require accepting ongoing business relationships with family members whose treatment of her had prompted the investigation in the first place. This consideration required balancing financial optimization with personal autonomy and emotional well-being objectives that had motivated her original decision to establish boundaries with family members who did not respect her contributions. Margaret, who had remained silent throughout the technical presentations, finally spoke with the professional directness that characterized her legal practice when addressing complex litigation scenarios. Diana, I need to discuss the potential consequences of pursuing aggressive asset recovery against family members who will characterize this action as vindictive litigation designed to destroy family relationships and business operations that provide income and employment for multiple people. Diana appreciated Margaret's warning about potential family and social consequences of pursuing comprehensive asset recovery, but she had already considered these implications during her decision-making process about establishing financial independence from exploitative relationships. Margaret, the family relationships were destroyed when these business assets were developed using my financial resources without my knowledge or consent, while I was simultaneously excluded from family gatherings and treated as irrelevant to family activities. Asset recovery is simply acknowledging the reality of what these relationships have always been and ensuring appropriate compensation for resources that were used without authorization. Margaret presented additional concerns about potential complications if other family members pursued defensive legal strategies or attempted to characterize Diana's asset recovery efforts as violation of family loyalty and mutual support obligations. Diana, Robert Jr., and Dad have already consulted with litigation counsel about potential strategies for defending against asset recovery claims. They are prepared to argue that your financial contributions were voluntary family assistance that did not create ownership interests or legal claims to business assets that were developed through their management expertise and operational involvement. Diana understood that pursuing asset recovery would require confronting sophisticated legal defense strategies and potential counterclaims designed to minimize her recovery rights while portraying her as an ungrateful family member who was attempting to profit from voluntary assistance provided during family difficulties. Margaret, the investigation has documented that my financial contributions were essential to establishing and developing these business operations, and that the cumulative value of my backing exceeded $900,000 over 12 years. These were not casual family assistance activities but systematic business capitalization that created legal rights to proportional ownership or compensation. Jonathan provided analysis of the strength of Diana's legal position and the likelihood of successful asset recovery despite potential defensive strategies by family members who would attempt to minimize their obligations and characterize her claims as unreasonable or vindictive. Ms. Walsh, our analysis indicates that you have strong legal claims supported by comprehensive documentation of your financial contributions and the business value created through leveraging your resources. Defensive arguments about voluntary assistance would be difficult to sustain against evidence of systematic business development that required ongoing financial backing and credit support over a 12-year period. The briefing concluded with Jonathan presenting strategic recommendations for pursuing asset recovery through negotiated settlement rather than extended litigation that could prove expensive and emotionally challenging for all parties involved. His approach would present family members with clear evidence of Diana's legal claims, while providing opportunity for voluntary resolution that would avoid public litigation and potential reputational consequences. Ms. Walsh, I recommend initiating settlement discussions by presenting family members with comprehensive evidence of your financial contributions and legal claims to business asset recovery. This approach would provide opportunity for voluntary resolution while demonstrating the strength of your position and the potential consequences of refusing reasonable settlement terms. Diana authorized Jonathan to proceed with settlement discussions while maintaining the option to pursue litigation if family members refused to acknowledge her legal claims or attempted to minimize appropriate compensation for her involuntary business investments. Tuesday afternoon brought the first response from family members who had been informed about Diana's asset recovery investigation and settlement demands. Robert Jr. called Diana directly rather than communicating through legal counsel, suggesting either confidence in his ability to negotiate resolution or desperation about potential consequences of formal legal proceedings. Diana, this investigation has created serious misunderstandings about family business activities that were always intended to benefit everyone involved, including you. The business entities that were established using coordinated family resources have provided returns in value that exceed anyone's individual contributions, and pursuing asset recovery claims would destroy operations that generate income for multiple family members. Diana recognized Robert Jr.'s attempt to reframe systematic exploitation of her financial resources as coordinated family business development that had created mutual benefits rather than unauthorized use of her backing to build assets she was never informed about or invited to participate in managing. Robert, I was never informed about business entities worth nearly $5 million that were established using my financial backing. I was never invited to participate in managing these operations or receiving returns on my involuntary investments. These arrangements were created without my knowledge or consent, while I was simultaneously excluded from family activities and treated as irrelevant to family interests. Robert Jr. attempted to present alternative explanations for the business development activities that would minimize Diana's legal claims, while acknowledging her financial contributions to family operations during difficult economic circumstances. Diana, the business entities were established to provide financial security and investment returns for the entire family during uncertain economic conditions. Your financial contributions were essential, but they were part of coordinated family investment activities rather than individual business capitalization that would create separate ownership interests. Diana understood that Robert Jr. was attempting to characterize her financial backing as participation in family investment pooling rather than unauthorized use of her resources to establish business operations she was never informed about or included in managing. This explanation would minimize her asset recovery rights while acknowledging her financial contributions. Robert, I never agreed to participate in coordinated family investment activities, and I was never informed about the business entities that were established or their financial performance. If these were intended as family investment operations, why was I excluded from all business discussions and decision-making processes while my financial resources were being used as foundation capital? The conversation continued for 30 minutes, with Robert Jr. alternating between defensive explanations of business development activities and emotional appeals about family relationships and mutual support obligations. His arguments suggested awareness that Diana's legal claims were strong enough to require settlement consideration, while hoping that family loyalty concerns might influence her willingness to pursue maximum asset recovery. Wednesday morning brought a different approach from Patricia, who called Diana with the desperate tone of someone whose comfortable lifestyle and social position were threatened by potential consequences of asset recovery litigation that could expose the extent of financial manipulation and unauthorized business development. Diana, this investigation is destroying our family and creating legal problems that could ruin everyone involved. These lawyers and accountants do not understand family relationships and mutual support obligations that have always characterized our family's approach to financial management during difficult times. Diana recognized Patricia's attempt to characterize professional asset recovery investigation as external interference with family relationships rather than necessary response to systematic financial exploitation that had been concealed from Diana while she was simultaneously excluded from family recognition and appreciation. Mother, the investigation simply documented how my financial resources were used without my knowledge to establish business operations worth nearly $5 million while I was being told that I was not real family and did not belong with accomplished people. Professional analysis was necessary because family members were not providing honest disclosure about the scope of business activities supported by my backing. Patricia's response revealed the desperation of someone who had finally understood that casual treatment of Diana's financial contributions and personal worth had triggered consequences that threatened everything the family had built through unauthorized use of her resources. Diana, we made mistakes in how we handled family relationships and social situations, but you cannot destroy 30 years of family business development because of hurt feelings about holiday gatherings. These business operations provide income and employment for multiple family members who would be devastated by asset recovery litigation. Diana realized that Patricia was acknowledging family mistakes while attempting to minimize the significance of systematic exclusion and disrespect that had continued for years, while Diana's financial resources were being exploited to build business assets she was never informed about or included in managing. Mother, asset recovery litigation exists to address situations where financial resources are used without authorization to build business assets that benefit people who refuse to acknowledge the contributions that made their success possible. This is exactly the situation that was created through systematic exploitation of my financial backing while treating me as irrelevant to family activities and interests. The conversation concluded with Patricia pleading for Diana to consider family welfare and mutual support obligations before pursuing asset recovery that could destroy business operations and financial security for family members who had been trying to manage complex business activities during challenging economic circumstances. Diana understood that her family's desperation represented recognition that professional investigation had documented systematic financial exploitation that created substantial legal claims and potential asset recovery opportunities. The sophisticated business empire that had been built using her financial backing without her knowledge represented both vindication of her decision to establish independence and opportunity for comprehensive compensation that would exceed the financial manipulation she had experienced. The deeper conspiracy had been revealed as systematic business development that had exploited her generosity and financial stability to create assets worth millions of dollars, while simultaneously excluding her from recognition, participation, and returns on her involuntary investments. Asset recovery would provide both financial compensation and authentic independence from family members who had demonstrated their willingness to exploit her resources while denying her basic respect and consideration. Diana Walsh recognized that the comprehensive forensic investigation had transformed her situation from defensive family boundary setting to aggressive asset recovery with substantial financial implications. The documentation of systematic business development using her unauthorized financial backing provided leverage that required strategic deployment to achieve maximum recovery while establishing permanent independence from family manipulation. Her documentary production expertise in research, narrative development, and strategic communication would prove essential for managing the complex resolution process ahead. The first strategic decision involved leveraging her professional network and business relationships to strengthen her negotiating position while demonstrating her capability for independent success without family involvement. Diana had spent 15 years building relationships with major networks, streaming platforms, and production companies that generated substantial revenue and provided professional credibility in entertainment industry circles. These relationships represented both immediate income security and potential expansion opportunities that would demonstrate her financial independence to family members who had consistently underestimated her professional capabilities. Diana contacted Maria Rodriguez, Senior Vice President of Documentary Programming at Atlantic Streaming Networks, to discuss acceleration of two major projects that had been under development for the past 6 months. Both projects involved substantial production budgets and multi-year distribution agreements that would provide immediate financial resources and demonstrate her professional success to anyone questioning her ability to maintain independence from family financial arrangements. Maria, I need to discuss expediting production schedules for the Environmental Justice series and the Technology Innovation documentary. Recent developments in my personal situation require accelerated revenue generation and increased professional visibility within the next 90 days. Maria had worked with Diana on 4 previous documentary projects that had achieved both critical acclaim and substantial commercial success for Atlantic Streaming Networks. Her confidence in Diana's capabilities and professional track record provided foundation for aggressive production scheduling that would meet Diana's strategic timeline requirements. Diana, both projects are ready for immediate production launch. The Environmental Justice series has confirmed participation from major advocacy organizations and government agencies. The Technology Innovation documentary has secured interviews with leading industry executives and academic researchers. We can begin production within 2 weeks and complete both projects within 4 months. The accelerated production schedule would generate approximately $400,000 in immediate revenue, while creating high-profile content that would demonstrate Diana's professional expertise and industry relationships. This financial and professional foundation would provide negotiating strength during asset recovery discussions while establishing her credibility as successful independent producer rather than family member dependent on external support. Diana also activated relationships with 3 additional networks and production companies to discuss new project development that would extend her professional commitments and revenue streams beyond the current production cycle. These discussions serve dual purposes of securing long-term financial stability and demonstrating to family members that her professional success operated independently of any family business arrangements or support systems. The second strategic decision involved assembling additional professional expertise to complement Jonathan Hartwell's asset recovery capabilities. Diana recognized that comprehensive resolution of sophisticated family financial manipulation would require coordinated legal, accounting, and business valuation services that could address all aspects of the complex situation while protecting her interests during potentially contentious negotiation and litigation processes. Diana engaged Patricia Kim, a partner at Brennan & Associates, who specialized in family business disputes and fiduciary litigation. Patricia's expertise in complex family wealth conflicts provided additional perspective on strategic approaches for maximizing asset recovery while minimizing emotional and reputational complications that could result from extended legal proceedings involving family members. Ms. Walsh, your situation involves sophisticated financial structures that demonstrate systematic exploitation of trust relationships for business development purposes. The combination of substantial asset values and clear documentation of unauthorized activities provides exceptional opportunity for comprehensive recovery through either negotiated settlement or aggressive litigation strategies. Patricia's analysis confirmed Jonathan Hartwell's assessment while providing additional strategic options for pursuing maximum asset recovery based on her experience with similar family business exploitation cases. Her recommendations included immediate preservation of business records and financial documentation to prevent potential destruction or alteration of evidence by family members who might attempt to minimize their legal exposure. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.